Hello and welcome to Coding Pirates TV as it is now. We are doing these live stream sessions where we are creating a game together, where I will show you Scratch, which is where we code, and you just follow along. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat and we will answer them. And if you have something you wanted to add to the game that we're making, also write them in the chat and we'll see if we can implement it together. The session today will be about 40 minutes long, so you can stay as long as you want, or you can watch the video later. It will all be uploaded to YouTube after today's session. So let me just check chat.
Yes, kan du trække tiden lidt ud? Der er ikke så mange serier endnu, kan jeg se.
Yes. So we're just gonna wait for a few minutes. Last time we also started 10 minutes late, so I just want to make sure that we get as many people in the chat before we start, so we can have a lot more people following the game. So to begin with, I've just opened the game as that we made last time, and I can just showcase what we actually made and explain what was done last time. I can see someone in the chat who lost his code from last time. You can also try and follow along while I go through everything quickly before we actually start the new features and new cool things for the game that we're making today. Last time we managed to make a bouncing ball and a player that you can actually move around. So just to showcase the game section is on the top right, which you see up here. So if I start the game, you can see the ball bounced and then it hit the cat. And when it hits the cat, we lose. It's game over, which means that the game stops. And before I can start the game, I have to drag the ball away and then start the game. Else I will lose instantly. So this is what we made last time, a ball that bounces randomly when it hit the edges, and then you have to avoid it for as long as possible. And the code for the ball is very simple. As you can see right now, we have these two blocks. The first one is basically the speed of the ball, which says 10 steps. And we can easily change this into a 2 and see it move way slower than it did before. So this is one way you can change the actual difficulty. But a number 10 is like, okay, and you can see it immediately changes the speed of the ball. This is all something that we made last week and we'll continue on today. The way that we have the ball bounce off the edges is the block on the right here, where we have something we call an if block. An if block is used for asking questions to the game, where we say if we are touching, in this case, the edge, then we will do something, and the something we do is turn by minus 100 to 180. This is just a full circle. And to make this even easier, you can see if you go down below the game, there is one called direction down here. If you click that one, you can see it comes up with a circle, and you can see the number changes if I drag it around, and the number goes from minus 180 to 180. And this is where we come up with these two numbers in the pick random. So whenever the ball hit the edges, it's gonna pick a random number between this, which means a random direction. But this is all that we made for the ball. The ball is very simple. For our player, the interesting part and the actual game for it, this is where we have the movement of our cat, and we made the cat move by using the arrow keys on your keyboard. Basically, your left and right will just turn the cat. So if I start the game, you can see left and right just turns it. And if I press up, we made it so that it moves in the direction that it's looking to. So it's a very simple movement for the cat. This can easily be changed. We can also make it so that it go backwards if we press the down arrow, but we haven't added that. The last thing that we made last time was so if I press either the cat or the ball here, I go into that specific code. So the way that we made the game over thing, that we can actually lose the game, is whenever again we use the if block, where we can ask a question. So if the cat is touching the sprite 2, and our sprite 2, as you can see, is our ball that I painted myself, as you can also see. Then we will do something, and then we have the block called stop all, which basically stops everything in the game, and that would be game over. This is all something we made last week, and hopefully we can continue today and make something even more awesome. This was only the beginning of the game. So I heard from my guy in the back, we are starting 10 minutes, or in 3 minutes, so 10 minutes past 6. Something to look into for the game that we made last time is that these two players, we have the player, which is our cat, and you have the ball. If you painted it yourself, or if you picked an image from scratch, that's up to you, but it would still be called sprite 2. The way that you can change the name to make it more simple to understand. If I select my cat here by clicking it, and then it has the blue edges, then I can change the name right above where it says sprite 1. So I want to call this player, because now I know this is my player, and this becomes very important when you have like a lot of objects or enemies. You want to make sure what is what. Is this an obstacle? Is it an enemy? Is it the player, or player 2 maybe? So in this case I want to call my sprite 1 player instead, because that's the actual player. So write that up here and then remove it. We are starting in 2 minutes on continuing on this game. So for the player, I now renamed it, as you can see, and you can also see in if we go to the ball that I made last time, is it's called sprite 2, but I want to call it enemy, or let's see, enemy. There we go. Yes. So this is the enemy that we have to avoid. So now they're called player and enemy. So if I go back to the player, you can see that the block where it stops the game if we actually hit the ball, it's called if touching enemy, then stop all. So this is more readable and easier to understand when you actually read it out loud. So yes, so this is basically all from last time. So I think we should get started on creating new stuff. So if everybody is ready, and if you don't have the code for this, actually, we will. I think we can have it so people can download what we actually made from last time. Jan in the back will make sure that you can actually download the version I'm working from, so you don't have to make it from scratch again. So you can follow along from today's session. Yes, okay, so let's begin with today's session, where we are gonna continue on the game that we started with last time. So we have the cat and the ball, and if you choose something different, that's also okay, but you should have two things. You should have a player and an enemy. And as I just mentioned, you can change the name by selecting it here. So if I select player, you can change it to whatever you want, but make it something that makes sense, like the player is you. Which makes sense. The first thing that I want to make is when we start the game by pressing the green flag on the top right here. You can see it just starts the game. The ball starts bouncing around. This becomes an issue when, as you see now, the game stops. And if I press the green flag again, it's gonna stop immediately because the ball is still on top of us. So we want to make a starting point for each of the player and the enemy. So we start apart instead of right on top of each other. And the way we make that is, first you need to stop the game. Make sure that the green flag isn't pressed. And then drag and drop the ball and the player to the positions that you want them to start in. And I want the ball to be on the top right and cat to be on the bottom left. So they are as far apart as possible, so I actually have a chance now to dodge the ball before being hit. But this will not occur when you start the when you start the game again. So as you can see, if I start now, it's gonna start from where it left off basically. So if I move it back up here, the code that we need to add is here in the enemy. So let's start with the ball. We want to make sure the ball starts on the top right. So go into the enemy code by pressing it so it has the blue highlight. Then you can see the code in the middle section here. And we want to add another green flag block, which is found under the yellow events. So if you go to the yellow events, you should find the green flag. And with this one, we want to set the position for the ball each time we start the game. So each time we press the green flag, we want to set the ball to a specific position. So to move the ball around, so this is a movement, we have to go into motion. That's the blue blocks. Whenever we want to move something, it's always in the blue blocks. And here you want to find the one called go to, yes, X and Y, this one right here, where it says go to X, a number, and then X, another number. In my case, it says 184 to, and then Y 140. The numbers will change depending on the position that you have set your enemy to be in. As you can see, if I move this, if I move the ball to the top left, you can see the numbers over here changes to the new position. So first select where your enemy should be starting from, and then drag the block out, because then it will have the correct numbers, and then add it to the green flag. So what you should see now, each time you start the game, each time I press the green flag, it starts from the top right. This gives us a good chance of dodging the ball, but you can also see that the ball keeps going in the same direction each time. We can also make this a random direction to make it even more fun, because right now we actually know that it's coming in that specific direction. So to do this, we need to find one called point in direction. That's in the middle here, also in the blue blocks. And this goes to as I showed before, with the minus 180 to 180. We actually have the block over here on the right, where we used it to go in a random direction whenever it hits one of the edges. So we can just copy this block, and copy blocks is a nice feature and makes it easy for you to actually use the code you had before. So to copy the green one here, you just simply hold your mouse over it and then right click. You should see this menu now where you can choose duplicate, and make sure you right click on top of the green one. Then you should create another green block with the same numbers. Then you don't have to remember the numbers or something. You can just use the same block in this case. And to add it to your to the point in direction, make sure you see the white highlight, the white edges here when I hold it over the number 90. This means that it attaches to the block. And to make this more readable, I'm just gonna move my blocks, and it should look something like this. So again, let's try and test the game, because we want to keep testing to make sure that everything is working as we want it to. But right now the ball should start from the top right and then go into a random direction. And each time we press the green flag, you can see the ball goes in a random direction. Great, so this was the first thing. Now we also need our player to start at the bottom left. Because if I actually start the game now and move up here and stop the game, if I start the game now, the ball will actually go to the top right as we made it, but the player will start from where I left off. So we need to add similar code to the player, but we need to go to our player code. And you do that by selecting on the bottom right here, select your player to go into where we have the movement and game over block. So again, I want to have this in its own like set of blocks. So find again another green flag, and then, as you might guess, we have to find the one, the blue block where it says go to position, the same block that we used for the enemy. But before we do that, I want to move my cat to the bottom right, so you can see when I move it, the go-to changes the X and Y numbers, and we want to have it to be to the bottom left, or you can choose whatever position you want, but I want to be in the bottom left. And then I can, after setting my cat in the right position, I want to take out the block and add it to the green flag. One thing I want to add to the cat is I don't want it to point in a random direction. I actually want it to point in to the right direction, and to do that, just take the point in direction and change nothing. Have it to be the number 90, because that means that it points it points to the right. As you can see, if you press the number, you actually get the circle here where you can see the numbers again. So you can. Without writing the number, you can just see it points to the right if you look at the arrow. So let's try and test the game now to see if everything starts up as we want it to. See, I point to the right, I move around, I stop the game, and then I start the game again, and everything starts in the starting positions as we just made it. So now we actually have a fair chance of surviving the game. But let's start making something cool instead. This was just to add to what we made last time, to actually have the game be fair and start as a normal game would. The next thing we want to add is we want to add so more enemies spawn over more time that you play. So the longer you survive, more balls will keep spawning, and you have to avoid more and more of these until you get hit and lose the game. So it's a game of seeing how long you can actually survive. And to do this, to create more of an object that you have, there is the option of duplicating it, but we don't want to do that. We want to make this easy and simple, so you don't actually have to duplicate your enemy or the ball. You can simply add a few more blocks to the code to have the same effect, instead of you having to. Let's say you want 10 balls to spawn, then you could duplicate by right-clicking and then keep doing this. But this just makes it, let's say you want 100 balls, it would take forever for you to actually copying and duplicating all of these enemies. So I'm just gonna deleting the ones that I just made by pressing the trash can on the top right. So I only have one. Yes, so let's try and add a clone, is what we call it, for our bouncing ball. And the way we do this is if we go onto control, and in here we have like blocks as if then that we used last time. But if you go on the very bottom here, there should be one called create clone, and this is the one that we want to work with. We want to create a clone after, let's say, 10 seconds. And then we want to keep doing this for until we lose the game, basically. So it's you want to see how long you can survive. But with this one, for this one to work, we want also to add. Let's see here. Seconds. Yes. When I start as a clone. Yeah. So the one right above where it says when I start as a clone, that's also one we need. But we want to create a clone for each 10 seconds, or for each 10 seconds. So we need a few blocks more from in here. You want to have the repeat at the very top here. This is where it gets interesting. So right now it says repeat this. So it will this block of code right here will repeat anything inside here. So if I put this one inside, it will repeat this 10 times. So you can add this to, say it should repeat it 100 times. But we also wanted to wait for we don't want to spawn 10 enemies within 1 second. So we have to add a wait block, which is on the top here in the orange control at the beginning. So we want to wait, I would say 10 seconds. You can choose whatever number you want. But the waiting 10 seconds before we spawn an actual ball makes the game easy at the beginning, but then it becomes very hard after, let's say, 20 seconds. But let's see what happens. Let's see. Yes. So this should happen when we actually start the game. So we are missing a block that we used before, is the green flag again. So this should activate when we start the game. So if you go into events and pick the green flag and add it to this one. And if we just read the code here, it will repeat when we the code will repeat 100 times. In my case, we can just say that should be 10 instead. If we can actually survive 10 balls bouncing around, you can increase this number. But this will start when we click the green flag, and then it will wait 10 seconds before adding the second ball, and then after 20 seconds it will have added 2 balls. Then it will create a clone of where it says myself, and in this case myself would be the ball in this case, because we are currently inside the code of the ball, and that means myself is the ball in this case. So if we just start the game again, we should see that after 10 seconds, if I can survive for that long. No. So for testing purposes, I'm gonna hide my player so I can't lose the game until I'm finished coding the ball. And to hide your player, you simply select it by clicking it, and then click the eye just above where it says show. If you click the eye to the right, he disappears, and to get him back, you just simply click the left eye. But in this case, we want him to be hidden until the code for the ball is finished. So if we go back, and then I'm just for testing, I'm gonna put this down to 1 second so we don't have to wait that long. We should see that it creates a ball after 1 second, but it doesn't move yet. And this is where copying your code is a very good thing to know, because we basically have to use the same code that we made for the first ball, but we need to add it to these when I start as a clone. So right now we are creating a clone, but we don't tell it to do anything, and we just have to have it to do the same thing as the first ball. So if we see the first one here in the middle, that's the movement of the ball. So if we just try and copy that without the green flag this time, you can just right click and then duplicate. Then you should have an exact copy of that block. And you can see when I clicked it, it activates. But If we start the game again by clicking the green flag, we should see that every second that it creates another ball that is actually moving as well. So now we actually start looking to have a difficult game if you have to dodge all these balls. Yes, so let's stop the game again. We also wanted to have it bounce from, or we wanted to, let's see. I actually want to slow the first ball down to 2. So the first line up here with all the green flags for our ball, that's the first ball in the game. So I'm setting the speed for that to 2 to make it very, very slow. So I have a good idea of what's happening with the next one. And you can see these are all moving by the speed of 10. I'm also gonna make that a 2. Yes. So right now we actually have a difficult game in case of dodging the balls. So while I was testing, I set the spawn time for the balls to 1 second. I'm gonna add this or increase this to 10 again, because now I know that we can actually spawn these balls and have them move around. The next thing we need to add for this, we want the balls to have different sizes, so they're not the exact same, which make them harder to see and more difficult to actually avoid. And to do this, we need another block of these when I start as a clone. If we go down here to the control and at the bottom, when I start as a clone. So it works the same way as we set the starting position for the first ball. In this case, we just want to set the starting size of the new clone ball. And to change size for the ball, we can go onto looks. That's the purple blocks. So right underneath motion, if we go into looks, you should find a block where it says set size to right now 100%. So this one. If you add that to when I start as a clone, and then we can set it to, let's say, 25. Let's see what happens. So after 10 seconds, we should see a ball being smaller. Let's see what happens. There we go. Okay, so for testing again, I'm gonna decrease the number of the spawning time to 1 here in the middle. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so we have a ball that's 25% smaller than the original. But let's make this a bit more interesting, because we want it to be a random size. So not all the balls are the same size. So we're gonna use the same block as with the directions, where we had pick a random number between 180. But we're gonna find it in the green blocks. This time we're not going to copy it, because we are going to use different numbers. So if you go on to operators, that's the green blocks. You can find it here on the top. Pick random number. And we want it to be between 25 and let's say 75. You can also play around with this and change the numbers as you want. 1% would be very, very small, and you can even go beyond 100, let's say 150, but that makes the ball way too huge to actually avoid. But you can try it out to see what happens. But I'm gonna pick, let's say, 25 and 50. Let's see what happens, what we get out of this. So also notice right now when I started the game that they are actually moving in the same direction each time they spawn. We want the balls to, when it spawns, it's gonna move in a random direction again, so it doesn't keep the same path as the original. So let's see if we can make that, to make this more clear to actually see. But you can see the different sizes on the balls right now. They are not this exact same anymore. Let's stop the game. So let's see if we can actually have them move in a random direction when they spawn as a clone, or when they start as a clone. So we need another one of these when I start as a clone. If you go on to control at the bottom and then find one more, we're gonna put that on the right here. The reason why I keep adding more of these, you could add all the code just to one of these, but this way it makes it more readable and easier to understand, to keep the blocks small instead of having just one big block. So for this one, we are actually gonna set. No wait. We're gonna save this one for later, but keep it on the right here. We're actually gonna go to the first one on the left, where we had the size of the ball, and instead of we're just gonna add a block to this with the directions. So we can actually go up here to the top and copy the point in direction that we used for the first one, which made it go into a random direction when the game starts. So we're just gonna duplicate this by right-clicking and pressing duplicate, and then add it. It doesn't matter if you add it above or underneath the size, but let's see what happens. Yes. So now you can actually see that every second I'm spawning a ball with a random size, and it goes in a random direction. And you can also see why we don't want this to happen every 1 second, because it makes the game way too difficult, way too fast. So I think right now is okay to stop the game and then increase the time for the ball spawning to 10 again. And we can actually add our player back to the game. And let's see if we can play the game for just a bit. Testing the game all the time is very important to see if everything works as you would like it to. Also to see crazy stuff happen in the game. So press the I to show it again, and let's start the game. So my player is moving way faster than the actual ball is, but I should see another one spawning in just a second. There we go. So here in the beginning it's very easy for me to dodge only these two rather slow balls. Another thing we are going to add to them is that they would have a random speed. Because right now they are all the same, as I set the speed to be 2. But we will also want this to be random to make it harder to avoid them. So let's stop the game and see if we can add this. So right now I'm looking at my player code, but I actually want to go back to the enemy by pressing the ball down here. So here we want to set the speed, and the speed for our ball or for the clones. I want the first one here on the top to be slow, because I wanted to make it easy for the first 10 seconds, and then it should be random from that point on to make it harder. And that's why I've set the number up here to 2. Down here it's also set to 2, and it will keep this number throughout the entire game unless we add something we call a variable. And a variable is a block that we can change throughout the game, because right now we actually have to manually go in there and change the number ourselves. But if we create what we call a variable, we can actually change the game with the code instead. So let's make our first variable by going to, I can see that my game started, so I'm just gonna stop that. If we go on to the variable section on the left here, that's the at the bottom here, variables, you should see a screen like this. So to begin with, there is one called my variable. We're not gonna use that. We're gonna make a variable. Just there is this hidden button above where it says make a variable. If you click that, and then it comes with a new screen where you can type something, and you have 2 dots down here. Make sure that you select for all sprites and not the one called for this sprite only. We're gonna use this later, but for now we're gonna use the for all sprites. And the name that you give it can be anything, but I suggest that you call it timer because we are not making a timer, we are making speed. So let's call it that instead. So yeah, give it names that make sense to what it's supposed to be. And in this case, I want this block to control the speed. So this is for the timer. If we were making that, we are gonna choose false sprites. But for this one is only for our ball and the clones of it. So this is only for this sprite. So we're actually gonna choose the one that I said not to before, but erase that. So make sure that you actually, for this one, for the speed, select for this sprite only. So make sure this one is highlighted. And then press OK. What you will see now is two things. In the game right now, you have a thing here called speed, and then there is a number 0. That's now the number that the variable holds. So it right now have the number 0. And you can see on the left here, we now have a block where it's a speed. This one, as I'm holding it now, has the number 2, or has the number 0. To change the number that it holds, we can use the blocks just below here. Right now they are saying set my variable, but we are not using that. You can change it by clicking the my variable, and then you can actually select your newly made variable speed. So now we are setting speed to have a different number if we use the first block here. And we want to use this down here. So I want to add this to the first when I start as a clone, because this is what should happen when I start as a clone. I want to give it a random size, I want to give it a random direction, and now I'm also going to give it a random speed. And I can do that with the number or with the speed variable that we just made. So make sure that you select the one, or you create a variable and then you select a block where it says set speed and not change. So set speed to, and then a number, and we want the number to be random. So we are gonna have we can either duplicate one of these random blocks that we already used, or go back into operators and then find a new one. And so speed is very if you have a speed of 10, then it goes really fast, and if you have a speed of 1, that goes really slow. So if you go above 10, I think it's going way too fast. So I think a good number would be 3 to, let's say, 8, to make it fair for the player. You can make it unfair, that's up to you. I'm not gonna stop you. So, but right now we're only setting the speed, we're not actually using it. As you can see here in the middle, where we actually have the speed for the clones, we want to add our new speed block that holds the number that we are setting when we start as a clone. And if you go onto variables again, you can see we have the one here called speed. We can actually drag this onto the number, and then it holds that place. So it's just a box holding a number for us that we can change with the code instead of you having to type it with your keyboard. So if we try and test the game now, we should see nothing happens, apparently. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So I didn't press start game. So right now it's moving, and then after 10 seconds, I should see, there we go. And you can see that the second ball is moving a bit faster. We don't know how fast it's going, but it's going with a number between 3 and 8. And there we go, another one. I think that one is going with a speed of 8.
Jeg tænker, vi skal runde af i løbet af de næste 5-10 minutter.
Yes. And as you can see, when I hit just one of these clones, the game actually stops and remove everything. So you can change the numbers as you want. You can even, so you can change the size to have it go even bigger or smaller if you like. But this variable is very important for future sessions in making these games, because we're going to use a lot of these. But just to give a good understanding, variables is just a box holding a number. And right now we are putting a number into the speed between 3 and 8. And let's see if we can make. So we are gonna end in 5 minutes. I'm just gonna round up here to give you a good idea of. We're gonna add one more variable before we end today, because we want to add a timer to the game to see for how long we actually survived in the game. Also to give us an idea for when the next ball is actually spawning. So to make a timer, I'm just gonna stop my game here. We have to make another variable, and in this case, I'm gonna call it timer, and make sure this time that you choose for all sprites, and then press OK. The thing is that if you look over here where we see speed and timer now, if I go to my player code, you can see that I can't see the speed anymore because that's only for the enemy. But to make the timer actually count, we are gonna add this code to our background. And to do that, go on the right here to where it says backdrops. There's this like white square. If you click that, you are now in the background code. And we're just gonna add three more blocks to make this work. You need, if you go to variables, you should have to instead of taking the set block, you're gonna take the change, and you want to change it into be timer by pressing the my variable and then timer. And we're gonna change it by 1 because it's 1 second. And we're gonna do this all the time, so you need the green flag for when the game starts, and you need a forever to make it happen all the time, and then you also need a wait. So I'm gonna find all these blocks that we have used before. So we need the green flag, we need control to wait, and we need a forever. So to set these 4 blocks together, we're gonna put everything in here, change this by 1 like this. So you should have 4 blocks added together. It should be like this. And in the game, you can see there is this timer. And if I start, you can see it counts. And to make it a bit more pretty, instead of it saying timer, you can double click it or right click it to change to different layouts. I'm just gonna double left click it. Then you should have something like this with just a number. And then I'm gonna hide the speed because it's not important for us. And to hide it, you have to go into the enemy which hold the speed, and then into variables, where you can see on the left here the speed. You can just simply uncheck this one to make it disappear. You can do the same for the timer, but we actually want the timer to be shown. So I think that's it for today. Hopefully everyone was able to follow, and if you missed something, the video can be watched after this, and you can just tag along and follow. Yes.
Vi uploader også filen.
Yes, and we will upload the file that was made, so you can download it and see what we made, and you play around with all the numbers inside to see if you can make something crazy. That's all up to you, whatever you want to do. But yes, that's it for today's session, and we will continue next time on this game around the same time as today. So thank you for joining us, and have a good night.